Hi, welcome. Better with Age, the Mindful Psychology of Successful Aging, Class 1. And it's based off this book by Alan Castile. I actually saw Alan speak. He was a wonderful presenter, and the book is filled with so much knowledge. One thing I highly recommend about the book is I'm going to be talking about a lot of studies that come out of this book, and they have it in the notes. So, of course, if you want to Google what I'm talking about, you can just put in keywords, and I'm sure you can find the studies. Or I highly recommend to get the book, and then you can see all the studies in detail in the notes in the back. So this is good. This is going to be an exciting class. I actually did do this class already on Zoom, and I didn't hit the record right, so I'm doing it again. So class 1 again, and I'm recording it this way we can get it up so lots of people can see it. All right, a couple days ago, my brother turned 50, and he got this present, and he was opening it up on Zoom, and he said, 50 is the new F word. I was like, oh, everyone laughed, especially he laughed, and his wife laughed, who's not 50, and it was on a mug. He's like, the new F word, 50. And I chuckled, but I didn't laugh. I'm over 50. And then I thought about my parents, and they're in their 70s. You know, they were on the Zoom call. I'm sure they're like, 50 is the F word, and I'm 70. What is that? What does 70 mean then? So, it made me realize aging is really so much out of perspective. And that's what's so fascinating about this wonderful book. It really talks about all these studies on how to understand that we actually get better with age. I'm not kidding you. We get better with age. But often we have this culture and this perspective that we don't, that we fall apart. It's something to be stressed out about, something to be upset about. And that really causes a lot of problems in our own psyche, which then goes and translates into our mental and our physical health. So I'm hoping that by taking this class with me, that you're going to get a lot of good facts about why aging is actually something to look forward to and something to celebrate, and that you get better with age, and it's going to give you some tips and some tools on how to age even with more joy, not with trepidation, and with resiliency. Because when you get older, your body it's getting a little worn out. But does that mean that we don't get better? So let's think about it. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and I have a great PowerPoint that's going to go on with this. So let me get to my PowerPoint. You can see I got lots of PowerPoints on here. And here it is. This is the one I'm talking about. We'll get to this one. And then we're going to get to current slide. There we go. All right. Here we go. Better with aging. So feel free to email me if you would like to make comments. That would be awesome. And any suggestions or other good books or other great studies to mention, I'd love to know them. So we're going to go over what the benefits of aging are, the research, and also we're going to talk about some really good role models that we should have. If you can't envision what you want, how can you create what you want, right? So there is a lot of people out of there that have aged so well. So let's think about them. And I like this little tagline. If things get better with age, then I'm approaching magnificent. So let's hold that to be our truth. So here's some quick questions. Now, if you could get a pen and a piece of paper, and let's just write them down. You don't need to send them in. They're just for us to refer back to as this course goes on. So what is successful aging? I want you to think about this, because we're going to ask, as time goes on, what does it mean? What is the definition? What's your definition? Could you put down 2 or 3 things? Successful aging. A lot of people would say maybe aging without pain. keeping your mental facility, being able to have a financial strong foundation, friends, purpose, lots of different words that might come up. And then when you're done that, write down what you think unsuccessful aging would be. So if you're saying, that is not how I'm going to do it, maybe someone can pop up in your mind. Unsuccessful aging, well, those who really age not well don't age very long, right? So obviously, tremendous health concerns, depression, there's some big ones there, but just a few words, because we're just trying to get it going, getting your mind flowing on thinking about this. And then, how old are you? Now, you should know how old you are, just so you all know. I am 53 at this time, and loving it. So I'm excited about that. How old do you feel? Now, that's very different. The one is biological. This is something which is perception. How old do you feel? Now, that can change, as we know. So like today, if you slept really well and you've eaten well and you've taken a nap, you might feel pretty peppy. But if you had a hard night's sleep, or we've been in quarantine while we're doing this class for a long time, and you feel like you're hitting your head against the wall a little bit, you might feel a little older. So just know that that can change. But on average, how old do you feel? How old would you like to be? That's an interesting question. So how old I am, and then how old do I feel? But if I got to choose my age, if I got to choose any age, what would you choose? Think about it. And why would you choose it? Would you want to be 18 again? Not me, sister, but maybe some people would like to be. Or would you like to be 35? But what happens when you're 35? Or, what's going on with your family, your career, your life, your choices? Just think about that. Maybe 45, maybe 55. Can you list 10 things in your mind when you imagine an older adult? So in general, now there's no norm. We all know that. Excuse me. And what would be something that would be kind of what would be the average or norm older adult? How old would that person be? Do they have gray hair? Well, let me tell you, you see this beautiful hair? It would be gray. Yeah. So I can go and get a box and change it to blonde. So I don't think of older adults. They could have gray hair, but then they may never have gray hair. Do they have hair? That's a question. But then there's my brother, I was telling you, who just turned 50, bald, way bald, but he's a Marine. And so it looks really good on him and has since his 20s. Who are the role models of people that you hold as someone who has successfully aged? Now, this could be a role model that you know. It could be your parents or aunt or an uncle or a grandparent, a friend. But it also might be someone out in the world that you feel aged extremely well, that you have never met. But who are the role models that you say, they got something over there. I want a little of that. Whatever's in their tonic and in their attitude, that's it. See if you can list someone down. So as you can see, as I was looking back, it's hard to define aging. They did some tests, and this is what I was going to refer back into the book. So we're doing chapter 1 of this book, and then some information that I have, just being a mindfulness teacher, kind of married together. But in the book, it talks about they were asking people, what is successful aging and what is the criteria of it? And in some ways, people wrote it, only 1% of us actually get checked off as successful aging. And then other people wrote criteria that 90% of us get checked off as successful aging. So you can see there's not one definition. It really has to come down to how you feel what successful aging is. They asked 3,000 people that were over 65, what age do you enter older age? What's the age that you consider someone now is older? And they said, well, the average age was 68. I thought that was interesting. But then they said, what about for you? And they said, well, now it's 68 for everybody else. They're called old. But I don't get old until I'm 85. Now, isn't that so funny? See, we have such different perceptions. Perceptions of the rest of the world, and then perceptions for ourselves. So you're old out there, but that's not me. That's not me. So it's interesting to know that that's really actually a collective feeling. Excuse me, there was this lady, Jean Louise Calment, born in 1875. She died in 1997, and she's the oldest documented person who has lived, and she was 122. Can you imagine 122? If they're thinking that old age starts at 68, she spent half her life in her older years. I mean, wow, that's crazy. She outlived her kids and her grandkids and everything. And so they asked her, you know, why do you think you did it? How did it happen? And she said, well, she had a lot of olive oil, port wine, chocolate, even some cigarettes. Can you imagine? Even some cigarettes. But she stayed calm. She had a calming personality. And she thought that that was very important. This is what she would say to people. I'm interested in everything, but passionate about nothing. And of course, I'm not quite sure what she meant by that, but what I think she meant by that is that she was always a learner, interested in everything, always leaning forward. Well, why is that happening? Well, why is that? She's keeping her brain going. And that is very much why we're taking this class. We are learning how to get better with age, and we're also validating what's working for us, and maybe we're then learning some belief systems or some actions aren't working for us, and we can change them. That is the purpose of taking this class, is to get better, right? To keep learning, to keep growing. And then when she said passionate about nothing, I don't think she meant like non-caring passion. I think she's trying to say she didn't get overly excited about stuff. She knows that things will pass. Well, that's not good, but I'm not going to freak out, right? Or she wasn't totally passionate about whatever it is. Here I have my eyeglasses. My favorite eyeglasses, I'm so passionate about, and then they break, and then you get totally upset. She'd be like, they're eyeglasses, impermanence, things change, you know, so she's not overly attached and set in her ways about something. She has that ability of being flexible. And really what we're describing right there is being mindful, because that's what we're talking about here. This is success with aging, the psychology, because we're going to do a lot of studies and the thinking behind it, but also really understanding being mindful, being in the present moment, okay, being aware of what's going on. So this is where you only learn in the present moment, right? I can't learn something new yesterday or learn something new tomorrow. I only learn now. So she's interested in everything. I mean, she's engaged in the present moment. But mindfulness means without judgment. It's huge. Without judgment. It means that you're not telling yourself a story as you're in the present moment. So in other words, you don't have a story taking over your present moment. And passion, as she was talking about, is something like as a judgment, like it's all good, it's all bad. I'm going to get totally excited. I'm going to get totally mad. That's all passionate feelings. She wasn't like that. She was in the present moment, absorbing and interacting and allowing it to flow and so forth. So I really believe if I got to sit down with this lady and talk to her, she was living a mindful life. starting in 1875. Now, I bet you anything there were some good genes in that too. But she did outlive her children and her grandchildren, so you would think that they maybe would get close. It's just important to realize that when we use mindfulness, when we really engage in the present moment, which what we're doing right now, when we engage in the present moment, and then we're able to learn, grow in a calm state of mind, instead of having all these huge roller coasters of life, life feels good. At least it feels good to me. So here we go. All right, successful aging. They did find out that a lot of people that consider themselves in successful aging is that they can define what's important to them and what they're doing has meaning. So if you sit back and you said to yourself, well, does today have purpose and meaning? Do I have importance? Am I engaged? It could be a connection with your family. It could be that you're a writer or a painter. It could be that you're volunteering. It could be you're writing a book. It could be that you are in a spiritual prayer and giving love to God or to the universe or wherever you go. But all this has meaning. And they found that that tends to be a very, very key factor, is that when people wake up, there's a purpose for waking up. There's a purpose, there's something to do, that you matter, and the feeling of matter. So we're going to go into that even deeper. I have a few IFs, which is important facts. I put them in red, and they came out of the book, and I love this one. The presidents live longer than the average adult male. Now, isn't that quite interesting? Because presidents, of course, have lived a very stressful life, as much as, as I would define as a stressful life. I mean, they're prepping to be the president the whole time, right? So their life is very driven. And then they go out there and they lay it all out for the whole universe, the whole world to see them, make choices, say their words wrong, spell wrong, make bad choices, what's their taxes, whatever it is. I mean, they're out there. So there's a lot of stress on them in everything they do, world decisions. And then when they leave, they have a legacy, and they still have a lot of people that are watching them and keeping the pulse on what they do. And then, of course, they always have the Secret Service with them at all times, because they don't want to make sure nothing happens to them. They can be threatened at any time. And they live longer than the average American? It's because they had a huge sense of purpose in everything they do. Right or wrong, they believe what they're doing has meaning. You see? So, yeah, they lived a stressful life, is how I would define it, but they lived an extremely meaningful life. So that's an interesting fact. Now, people who don't, they find, have a successful life are people who have addictions. Okay, so now let's think about that real quick. I want you guys to realize that when addictions are such a huge part of our society and our time right now, because we have alcohol addiction. Now, that's been around for a long time, but now we have prescription drug addictions and other drug addictions, right? And then we also have food addictions and so forth. It's so easy to get lost into covering up your pain and then getting yourself biologically or with psychology addicted to something. And that takes a lot of people's lives. There is no successful aging if you're in addiction. It wears out the body, and then you have obviously drug overdoses, and you don't eat well maybe, and so diabetes and other things can take you, right? So part of successful aging is not being addicted, having control of your mental thinking and your biological body through what your choices are. And we're going to talk a lot about that. And then also successful aging is you got to get past first step, get out of middle age. You got to make it through your 40s and 50s. And we're going to come with, especially next week when we talk about, or the class 2, when we talk about happiness and successful aging, we're going to talk about how the 40s and 50s are rough years for people. So let's see. So the big question is not how old you are, it's really how old do you feel. They're finding that that is a huger correlation to successful aging. So it doesn't matter if you're 80 years old. If you're 80 and you feel like you're 100, you're not gonna live that much longer. If you're 40 and you feel like you're 80, says a lot. But if you're 80 and you feel like you're, 70 or 60, that also says a lot for the positive. They found that on average that people that are 40 feel like they're 32, people that are 60 feel like they're 48, people that are 80 feel like they're 60. These are setting up expectations. If I'm 80 years old, but I say I feel like I'm 60, then I mean a 6-year-old is someone who goes out for a walk. A 6-year-old is someone who's playing bridge or playing golf or something. So those are my expectations, and you start living into it. How old do you wish to be? Often, most people say they're about 10 years younger. So look down on a piece of paper. How old did you say? If you were 80, do you say, well, I wish I was 70? If you're 60, you wish you were 50. That's what the average is. I think it's not like people want to be, who are 80, want to be, 45 again. It was rough. There was a lot going on at 45. People just want to be healthier, a little healthier, but they want to keep their wisdom, right? So if I said I would have the body of a 45-year-old and the brain of someone who was 70, I'd say that's great. But that's not what I was asking, is how old do you want to be? And if you have to return back and you have to give up all your wisdom. And wisdom and understanding life, that's really part of the art of successful aging, right? You'll find that when people, they talk about it, people that feel younger hang out with people who are younger. And often if people feel old, they tend to hang out with people who are older. Now, this makes a lot of sense in psychology. Like-minded people attract each other. They want validation of who they feel they are. So you don't consciously think, oh, I want to hang out with someone who feels young too, but it feels good when you're with them because your conversations match. Your activities go together. So like-minded people attract like-minded people. And if you have people who feel young or act young and are together, then they set up this whole pinnacle of thinking, of expectations to be young. And then your body reacts to that. You exercise better, you eat better, you have better relationships, and so forth. So it's very important for us to know that when we feel like we're younger, we look younger, we act younger, our body becomes younger, and it stays healthier because you have more movement, you're learning and growing, and then you look younger. And you see how that cycle, and it could go the other way. So they did this study in Berlin in 2014, and they collected a whole bunch of information from people who were 75 years old about, their cognitive abilities and their expectations and their feelings and their moods and things like that. And then they compared it to a similar study that was done in 1990. And what they found out is that the people that are 75 years old in 2014 scored very similar to 55-year-olds in 1990. Isn't that interesting? So in their cognitive ability and in their perceptions and their moods and so forth, very similar. So are we getting younger? I think so. Why? I don't know. There's a lot of different reasons why. Part of it is that we know how to take care of ourselves, and people are doing things that we're doing now. We also like taking this class. People eat better overall, those who want to stay healthy, right? They realize that it's not a death sentence to be 75 years old. I have friends who are 85. I have a good friend who's 89 years old, and he is rocking it. rocking it. That is so cool. So is the new 75 the old 55? You know what? It might be. It might be. It could be for you, could be for me. In the book, Alan Cassell was asking, and they had a nice section in the book, and it was talking about how do you know? Well, people feel like, man, I'm losing my mind. I have dementia, or do I have Alzheimer's coming out, or something like that. And I really liked what he said in the book. He said, you can take a lot of tests, okay? But the best thing to do is listen to yourself and also listen to your friends and family. So I know this is really true for me because I felt like, man, I think I'm losing it. And I asked my husband, do you think I'm getting dementia? I mean, my granddad had Alzheimer's, so that's in the back of my head that it's in my family. And he looked at me and said, nope, don't think so. You couldn't remember anything the day I met you. And that's true. If I was 20 or 30 or 40, and I couldn't remember where I put my car, I'd say, wow, I'm being a space cadet, or man, I'm really stressed out, or man, I gotta sleep better, you would say something like that. But then I hit 50, same thing. I'm like, I can't remember that person's name. I think dementia is kicking in. And my husband would be like, you haven't remembered anyone's name since the day I met you. You barely remembered mine. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I'm just a space cadet. So we have to be careful that when we get older, that we don't blame things that are happening that have always happened on age and then start getting ourselves worried in that direction. Get a baseline. When I am tired, when I am upset, when I am angry, I don't remember where I put my keys. Is that because I'm old or getting older? No, it's because I'm tired, I'm angry, and I'm upset. I'm not focusing. So know that we need to make sure that we put things in perspective. So I like this little cartoon. It says, you should pay a teenager to find our car. Dad does this when he loses his keys. I need to have that teenager. That's why I had kids. I'd say I remember my kids would get, I'd say, okay, everyone remember we parked the car, and I make everyone look around. I'm all of, 40. I'm not old. I'm just busy. So, all right. In the book, it talks a lot about what's so great about goal setting when you are getting older. And he has a terrific section, let me get to it, in the book. And he talks about optimizational and compensation. And what he said is that one thing that older people really do well is they start to understand really what their strengths and weaknesses are in life. And they also can see as their body changes, they can be much more flexible on that. And they can compensate. They substitute activities that are more for age friendly is adaptive, such as replacing racquetball with golf, or even taking up these sports earlier in life, knowing that they are ones that they can enjoy when they become older. And I find that really true. I have a lot of friends who love golf. And one thing they love about golf, I mean, they could go play basketball still, but they love golf is that they know that they can play it, if you stay healthy, you can play it into your 80s. My dad today actually ran, he called it a half of a half marathon. Is that so cute? Well, he's 75 years old. And he decided he always ran a half marathon with my brother, but he decided this year he's going to change it to a half of a half marathon. Say that real fast. Half of a half marathon. It's perfect. It's not that he doesn't run, but does he really need to run 13 miles? No. Why? I can't run 13 miles. I don't think I could even run 3. But he said, I'm doing a half marathon. So he's still doing his marathon, but he did 6.5. Perfect, right? Right? Is he happy? Does he have purpose? Does he have meaning? The answer is yes, absolutely. Did he go out and do it? Yes. Did he achieve his goal? Yes. Did he hurt himself? No. That is so awesome. See, we don't get stuck in hurting ourselves in our goals when we get older because we get better and wiser, right? So the other thing, the next chapter or section he broke into, and I love this book because it's on these little sections. The emotional goals of older age, social emotional selective therapy, theory, not therapy. And this really goes in hand. They talk about what I was just talking about. They talk about youth, and youth have this want to accumulate knowledge and things. And they go to school, knowledge, right? That's what they're meant to do. They're meant to go then maybe to college or get their law degree or their med degree, or they become a mechanic or whatever. They're just learn. And then they also want to collect things. I need to get a house, a car, a wife, a kid. You know what I mean? So there's these like checklists of things outside. I need to have the right shoes and the right writing pen and fancy vacations, all these things. But older people, they realize, man, I don't need all that. I want to have emotional meaning. So they get really more into having selective goals, that it's spending time with their animals, spending time with their spouses, spending time with their friends. They end up really remembering things. When you look back, what was important? It was the emotional connection. And so that really makes it much easier in life when I know that I don't have to memorize a book to feel like I achieved something, and I don't need to have a brand new house or car or husband. I don't need any of that. What I really want to do is just have a nice dinner with my family, and I feel like I achieved something. So when you get older, what happens is you end up being more in the present moment, right? Like I was saying, without that judgment, without that story that you keep up with the Joneses, or that you have to run the whole marathon, or you have to run the whole half a marathon. You can be in the moment. What is practical now? What is flexible? What is meaningful to me? And that makes us feel better. And if we feel better, then we become more successful physically and mentally. So we said, look at the 10 things that came up in your mind when you imagine the typical adult. Your attitude about how you view aging really is like the largest predictor on how well you will age. And I don't even mean your attitude now. I mean when you were 20, 30 years old, even in your teens. If you have a real negative attitude of aging, it's a huge predictor on how you will age. What you think about, you bring about. So here's another important fact. The more TV you watch, the more negative attitude you have about aging. Think of Archie Bunker. I used to watch Archie Bunker. He was an old grumpy man, right? So that was my attitude of aging. Not my grandfather wasn't like Archie Bunker, but it did imprint that into my mind. Now I look at it, Archie Bunker was meant to be in his 50s. I'm in my 50s. Am I anything like Archie Bunker? No, I am not. And that really blows my mind away, because I thought, oh, when people get older, they're just going to get grumpier. But that is not true. But that was imprinted from TV, not from real life. So a lot of times, older people look weak, or they look sick, or they look grumpy, and that gets in your brain. Don't let that get in your brain. They did another study. I like this one in 1979. It was a long time ago they did it, but it was still a very cool study. They took a motel and they made the motel look like the 1959s, that era. So, right at the end of the 50s, the beginning of the 60s, that whole, it's kind of a cool looking time period. And they went and they got some men that were between the ages of 70 and 80 that were actually having a hard time. They're a little depressed, you know, they weren't liking aging and so forth. And they asked them to come live in the motel for 1 week. Now, the first group that went in, they said, just reminisce. You remember the things that happened when you were in 1959. So this is 20 years before. So they obviously were in their 50s and 60s at that time, 1959, not 29. And then they took another group and they said they gave them the motel for a week. And they said, okay, not only do we want you to think about it, we want you to act like it was 1959 again. So they actually went out and they started to like play, you know, throw footballs and I don't know, dance and listen to music or whatever they would do for that whole week. And then they did pre-test and post-test. Now, both groups had better memory, strength, and hearing. Isn't that cool? From being in this motel for a week. But the group that actually acted like they were younger had better dexterity, flexibility, and looks. And how they did it with looks is they took a pre-picture of the guys and a post picture, and then they had a third group rank all of them. Do they look any different from before that 1 week to after the week was over? And the second group that was active actually looked younger. So you want to look younger? Get out there and do things that you think is young, that brings back your spirit of your youth. Now, I do want you to say these guys were 70 and 80 and they're 20 years younger. So they were asking them to act like they're 50 and 60. That was youth. That's me, right? It's a good age. I like it. They did another study. This was the Nun Study in the United States, and it was of the Sisters of Notre Dame. And all the sisters were between 75 and 107. And it was a terrific study because people didn't drop out of it, which happens a lot in longevity studies. There's longitudinal studies. They drop out, but once they were all nuns, they didn't. And they gave them cognitive tests throughout their time of their life. And then the women donated their brains to see how healthy their brains were. Obviously, after they were dead. And what they found out is that these women, all of them, kept their cognitive abilities all the way up to death. But then when they did the autopsies, some of the women actually had brains that looked like they had Alzheimer's, right? They had all that plaque built up, but they weren't registering it in the cognitive ability. So they did not see it happening in the sisters, but it was happening. Is that mind-blowing? Really take that in. Is that mind-blowing? The women had the plaque, had the brains of someone who has Alzheimer's, but did not have the cognitive ability to match that. They kept their cognitive ability. Well, there could be lots of different reasons for that, they say, of course, but one of them is that the women were very mindful. They meditated and they prayed for hours every day. So they stayed themselves in a nice calm place, staying focused in the present moment in their love with God, right? And so they kept exercising their ability to use their brain, and they weren't living in this fear, the fear of death, the fear of getting older. They were in community. We can do that. We don't have to become a nun. We can meditate, we can pray, we can keep ourselves connected in community. We can live without fear. I'm not saying they didn't have problems. Please understand. But there's a difference between living in chronic fear and living with just, concern, healthy concern. So the question goes back, who's the role models? It's time for us to really implement some role models in our life on what we want to be instead of what we don't want to be. If you look back on your paper that we filled out, you want to be able to say what you want to do when you become older, not in the fear of worried where you're going. Because if you do that, then your brain stays in that negative mode. And we're going to talk much more about this in our next class with happiness. But here's some wonderful role models. Grandma Moses, right? She didn't even start paying until she was 76 years old. Now that is cool. Okay. Frank McCourt, I loved his book, Angel's Ashes. He wrote that book when he was 65. I'm thinking about writing a book now. I've never written a book, but why not? Why not? Give it a try, right? Colonel Sanders, man, he was in his 60s when he was doing all his things, and he sold it in his 70s. That's very cool, right? And Judi Dench, I don't know if I said her name right, but she's a marvelous actress. And Judy received 7 Oscar nominations, all of them in her 60s. So it's time for us to say yes to aging. Yes, aging better, being successful. It's time to say life can get better. Today is good and it can get better, no matter what's going on. I understand that there's been a coronavirus. I understand that there's financial problems. All right. It's all happening. It's true. But it doesn't mean that I can't age with grace. I can't keep myself in a happy, centered place where I can have clear, calm thinking, that I can stay connected with people, that I can keep my heart open, that I can meditate, and I can still do other things like write and, walk and whatever it is, play golf, run a half of a marathon. Nah, not me. Okay, class 2, we're going to go into chapter 2 of Better with Age. And we're going to also really get into the brain and mindfulness and the art of happiness. It's going to be excellent. I look forward to seeing you at class 2. Have a great day.